The colony ship crashed on the frozen world of Vareth 7 during the worst storm the planet had seen in 40 cycles. Elena Vasquez was the only survivor. She pulled herself from the burning wreckage with broken ribs and blood running down her face. The cold hit her immediately. It was a cold that went straight through her thin maintenance uniform and into her bones. Elena had been a simple engineer on the ship. She fixed pipes and checked oxygen levels. She never trained for survival on alien worlds. She never learned how to build shelter from ice or find food in frozen wastelands. All she knew was that the temperature was dropping fast and her body was not made for this kind of cold. The Varaxian Council had warned humans about Vareth 7. They said it was too cold for the soft-skinned species from Earth. They said humans were too fragile for most of the galaxy, too weak, too small, too dependent on their machines and their heated ships. But humans kept spreading across the stars anyway. They were curious creatures who could not stay in one place. Elena walked through the snow for 3 hours. Her fingers turned blue. Her lips cracked. She could not feel her feet anymore. The twin suns of the Vareth system had set, and darkness covered everything. She thought about her daughter back on Earth, little Maria, who was only 7 years old. Maria, who loved to draw pictures of spaceships and dreamed of visiting the stars one day. Elena fell to her knees in the snow. She could not walk anymore. Her body had given up. She looked at the dark sky and saw strange constellations she did not recognize. She thought this would be where she died. Alone on an alien world, frozen in the snow like a forgotten statue. Then she heard them, soft sounds in the darkness, movement through the snow. Elena tried to stand, but her legs would not obey her. She could only watch as shapes emerged from the white landscape around her. They were large, covered in thick silver fur. They walked on 4 legs, but their front legs ended in hands with long fingers. Their eyes glowed a soft blue in the darkness. Elena knew about the Koreth. Every human in this sector knew about them. They were the native species of Vareth 7. The Galactic Council classified them as primitive. They had no cities, no technology. They lived in caves and hunted for food. Most species in the galaxy ignored them completely. There were 5 of them standing around Elena now. But they were not the full-grown Koreth she had seen in pictures. They were smaller, younger, cubs. The largest one was maybe half the size of an adult. They stared at her with those glowing blue eyes. Elena waited for them to attack. She was too weak to run or fight. The largest cub moved closer. It tilted its head and made a low sound, almost like a question. Elena tried to speak, but only a weak sound came from her throat. The cold had stolen her voice along with everything else. What happened next changed how Elena thought about the universe forever. The large cub looked at the others and made several short sounds. The other cubs responded. They seemed to be talking to each other, deciding something. Then the large cub walked right up to Elena and began to remove its outer pelt. The thick silver fur that covered its body came off in one piece like a coat. Underneath, the cub still had a layer of shorter fur, but the outer pelt was clearly important for warmth. The cub draped the pelt over Elena's shoulders. The warmth was immediate. It felt like stepping into a hot bath after being outside in winter. Elena's frozen body began to shake as heat returned to her muscles. The other cubs did the same thing. One by one, they removed their outer pelts and placed them on Elena. They covered her completely. Her body, her legs, her arms, even her head. She was wrapped in a cocoon of alien fur that smelled like pine trees and something sweet she could not name. The cubs stood around her now in their thin inner coats. Elena could see them shivering. They were cold without their pelts, but they did not take them back. They stayed close to each other for warmth, and they kept watching Elena with those curious blue eyes. Elena started to cry. She could not help it. Here she was on a strange world. dying in the snow, and these young creatures who had never seen a human before had given her the warmth from their own bodies. They had made themselves cold so she could be warm. The largest cub made another sound. This time, it was gentle, almost comforting. Then it did something even more surprising. It lay down next to Elena and pressed its body against hers. The other cubs followed. They surrounded her completely. Their bodies added more heat to the pelts. They were keeping her warm with everything they had. Elena drifted in and out of sleep through the long night. Every time she woke, the cubs were still there, still pressed against her, still sharing their warmth. Sometimes they made soft sounds to each other. Sometimes they were quiet, but they never left her. When the twin suns rose over the frozen horizon, Elena was still alive. Her body was warm. Her fingers had color again. She sat up slowly, and the cubs moved with her. They were tired. Their eyes were half closed. They had stayed awake all night to keep her safe. Elena looked at the largest cub. She did not know how to thank a creature that did not speak her language, so she did the only thing she could think of. She put her hand on her chest and then reached out to touch the cub's chest. A simple gesture. My heart to your heart. Thank you. The cub seemed to understand. It made a warm sound and pressed its head against Elena's shoulder. The rescue ship arrived 6 hours later. The Galactic Council had tracked the crash and sent help. When the rescue team found Elena, they could not believe what they were seeing. A human woman surrounded by 5 Korath cubs, all of them sharing pelts and warmth like old friends. The rescue captain was a Varaxian named Toreth. He had spent 200 years traveling the galaxy. He thought he had seen everything. But this sight made him stop and stare. The cubs did not want to leave Elena at first. They followed her toward the rescue ship. They made worried sounds when she walked away from them. Elena knelt down in the snow and hugged each one of them. She cried again. She could not stop herself. Toreth watched all of this with amazement. Later, he would write in his report that he finally understood why humans had spread so far across the galaxy despite their physical weakness. They had something that many species lacked. They inspired love in others, even in creatures who had never seen them before, even in the young of a primitive species on a frozen world. The Korath cubs were celebrated across the galaxy when the story spread. Scientists came to study them. They discovered that the Korath were far more intelligent than anyone had believed. The cubs had recognized Elena as a living being in danger. They had made a choice to help her, even though it cost them their own comfort. That kind of thinking required empathy, understanding, maybe even love. Elena returned to Earth and held her daughter Maria in her arms. She told Maria about the cubs who saved her life. Maria listened with wide eyes and asked if she could meet them one day. The Galactic Council changed the classification of the Korath from primitive to developing intelligent species. They placed Varath 7 under protection. No one could colonize or exploit it anymore. Elena went back to Varath 7 3 years later. She brought warm coats designed for Korath bodies. She brought food and medical supplies. She brought scientists who wanted to learn, not take. And she brought Maria, who was now 10 years old and still dreamed of the stars. The largest cub had grown into a young adult by then, but it recognized Elena immediately. It walked up to her and pressed its head against her shoulder. The same gesture from that cold night. My heart to your heart. I remember you. Elena spent the rest of her life building a friendship between humans and Korath. She learned their language. She taught them about the stars. She showed them that not all visitors from the sky were dangerous. And every year, when the first snow fell on Varath 7, Elena would join the Korath for a ceremony. They would gather together. They would share warmth. They would remember that cold night when 5 young cubs chose kindness over comfort, when they wrapped a strange, shivering creature in their own fur and kept her alive until morning. The galaxy learned an important lesson from that story. Humans were small and weak compared to most species. They could not survive extreme cold or heat. They needed air and water and food. They broke easily. But something about them made other beings want to protect them, want to help them, want to love them. Maybe it was because humans loved so easily themselves. Maybe it was because they saw beauty in strange places and reached out to touch it. Maybe it was because they never stopped hoping, even when they were dying alone in the snow. Whatever the reason, the story of Elena and the cubs became famous across 1,000 worlds. It was proof that the smallest act of kindness could change everything. That warmth shared freely was never wasted. That the universe, despite all its cold and darkness, still had room for creatures who would give the coats off their backs to save a stranger. And somewhere on Verath 7, an old Korath still kept a piece of thin cloth that smelled like a human woman. A reminder of the night everything changed, a reminder that even the weakest beings in the galaxy could inspire the greatest love.